film we had to do, and we could make any sort of premise, any sort of story we wanted. I was responsible for crafting a story, and I decided we would go for a detective theme and story. I think in terms of soft skills, because we're in a group, definitely listening. Had to listen, see what exactly we could do, how quickly we could do it, and if everyone was happy with what we were going to shoot. Creative thinking as well as creative writing as a hard skill. I was responsible for making this quick script and basically the narrative of the short film. Camera work as well, I was responsible for being behind the camera as well. This was definitely more in line with my career goal of being a scriptwriter. I think this was probably the first time in college that I was responsible for writing a script. Script writing abilities back then would have been a little more primitive, but I've learnt since then, and because of this I've learnt how to make a serviceable script and to see it actually executed on film as well. The editing challenge thing I did in my own time. I think in terms of soft skills, I had to be quite resourceful. I picked this because it was something I was studying in another lesson, and I had to work with what I had, and I made sure that I had to work with only what I had, and I think being resourceful was a big part of making this, as well as storytelling, because I wanted to sort of craft my own sort of story with this. In terms of hard skills, definitely editing. This was the first major bit of editing work I ever did at Long Road, and I forced myself to go research, learn how to use the software properly, learn all sorts of techniques as well. Game character animation I did. In terms of soft skills, it was definitely doing research for how to use this 3D modeling program. Had to read up a lot, make sure I knew exactly what I was doing, because the process of creating my character specifically was a little more complicated than what we'd done in the last year, so I definitely had to do a lot more research. Creativity as well, I had full control. I was allowed to make pretty much whatever I could think of, and I was pretty happy with what I made. In terms of hard skills, creative writing, because we had to create a backstory and a world before we would actually start making the character in the modelling software. And speaking of modelling, 3D modelling and animating, although not directly linked with my career goals, could prove useful. Obviously, creative writing definitely relates directly into my career goal of being a writer. For the animation, it certainly does relate to the writing career aim of mine. I had to basically paint out this whole backstory and world that my game character lived in, and that aspect of world building is definitely a big part of becoming a writer. This is the horror movie that we had to do. We had some problems at the start of it, which meant that some soft skills I could develop was problem solving, how to get around some of the sudden problems that came up, communication as well with the group members, decision making to make sure that we were being efficient, as well as creative thinking, as we had to redo a large majority of the project. Some hard skills I learnt was developing my editing skills when editing together all of the footage, as well as camera work, because I was primarily behind the camera filming everything we got. I had to do one of the soft skills was definitely listening. This was a group project. It was a larger group we were in. Everyone had their say. There was a lot of storytelling ideas we had as well, which was another soft skill. But in terms of listening, there was a lot of different things we had to decide on. What song we were going to do, what sort of story we were going to try and convey. It also includes having to adapt as well, another soft skill. Adapt and be willing to adapt as well, and be able to run with sudden changes